Just before you reach Las Vegas, you pass a town that feels frozen in time. The roller coaster stands still, the casino lights are off, the doors are locked, and the slot machines haven't played a tune in years. This is Primm, once the first taste of Vegas for anyone driving in from California. Now, it's a ghost town sitting under the desert sun. But what happened here isn't just bad luck or poor management. It's the first clear sign that Nevada's gambling empire is starting to fall apart. Because if a town built on winning can lose everything, what does that say about the rest of Las Vegas? The highway leading to Primm stretches flat across the desert, where nothing moves except heat waves. In the distance, the faded roller coaster rises above the sand, its metal frame catching sunlight that no longer shines for tourists. The first sight of Buffalo Bills once meant excitement for travelers. Today, its windows are dark, and the parking lot is empty. The building stands quiet, holding inside it the sound of slot machines that will never play again. A few cars still pull over on the shoulder, their drivers curious about the silence. They take photos through dusty windows, wondering how a place that looked so promising could fade into this, surrounded by miles of open desert. Inside, the carpets are worn and covered in dust. Chairs sit perfectly still beside machines that haven't been touched in years. The air is dry, heavy with the memory of people who once came here chasing a small piece of luck. Locals who worked the tables used to greet familiar faces every weekend. Some stayed for decades, thinking the town would always have life. Now most have left, leaving behind homes, memories, and a skyline of empty hotel towers. Across the road, the Primm Valley Resort shows the same signs of stillness. Its fountain no longer runs, and the neon sign flickers weakly. For many, it's hard to believe this was once considered a golden stop before Las Vegas. The once busy gas stations nearby now sell more dust than fuel. A few travelers stop out of habit, not knowing the casinos behind them have closed. The smell of gasoline mixes with the emptiness that hangs over the highway. The small souvenir shops that line the street are shuttered. Their windows still display faded posters of Elvis, poker chips, and plastic dice. The doors are chained, but the signs promising good luck inside still hang, untouched and forgotten. A few residents still live in the area, mostly older couples who remember better years. They keep their homes clean and talk about when the lights from Buffalo Bills could be seen glowing miles down the road at night. Primm didn't die in a single day. It was drained quietly, one job, one traveler, one night at a time. By the time people noticed, the life that kept the town alive had already faded into the sand. Back in the 1990s, Primm was alive with sound and color. It was the border's crown jewel, a place where travelers from California could feel the thrill of Vegas without driving the extra 40 minutes. It was small, but full of energy. Families would pull over to stretch their legs, fill their tanks, and try their luck on the slot machines. Kids watched the roller coaster loop above the parking lot, while their parents played cards inside. The town buzzed with movement. Tour buses lined the streets, unloading travelers eager to gamble for a few hours. Restaurants served cheap buffets, and the smell of food mixed with cigarette smoke and the sound of coins falling from machines. It felt like the start of something big. On weekends, rooms were fully booked. Every casino ran promotions, live bands, and giveaways. Even those who didn't gamble came for the energy, the feeling that this was a piece of Las Vegas built right at the state line. The roller coaster, once one of the tallest in the state, became a symbol of Primm's ambition. Families came just to ride it, and the photos taken there filled travel brochures for years, promising excitement in the middle of the desert. Investors saw Primm as the next big thing. They poured money into new attractions, confident the traffic between California and Nevada would keep growing forever. For a while, it seemed like nothing could slow down the rhythm of the slot machines. Each weekend felt like a celebration. Dealers joked with regulars, bands played covers of old hits, and the streets outside glowed under the casino lights. For many workers, this wasn't just a job. It was proof that the dream was real. Marketing campaigns painted Primm as the perfect introduction to Vegas, where travelers could win big before they even reached the Strip. The billboards promised quick luck and easy money, turning a desert town into a destination on its own. By the early 2000s, Primm reached its peak. Expansion plans were drawn, new rooms built, and traffic counters showed record numbers. The lights on Interstate 15 shimmered every night as travelers poured in for one last bet before heading home. Then the first signs of trouble appeared. A new wave of travelers preferred to skip Primm altogether. They wanted the full Vegas experience, the mega resorts, the big names. Primm suddenly felt like a warm-up act no one needed anymore. Gas prices climbed, and families began cutting stops from their trips. The casinos noticed fewer guests checking in. The bars were quieter, and the once busy buffets started closing earlier. The energy that once filled the town began to thin out. By the late 2000s, the economy tightened, disposable income disappeared. People no longer drove hundreds of miles just to gamble. For the first time, casinos in Primm struggled to fill tables that once had waiting lines. The 2008 crash hit Nevada hard. Tourism dropped, and construction halted. Small towns like Primm felt it the worst. Hotel wings closed. Layoffs spread quietly. The lights stayed on, but fewer and fewer rooms had guests inside. Older gamblers began staying home. Younger travelers wanted nightlife, not slot machines. The audience Primm depended on was disappearing. Corporate managers tried new marketing tactics, but nothing could compete with the power of Las Vegas just up the road. Maintenance costs kept rising, and profits kept shrinking. What once felt like a small version of Vegas now felt like its shadow. The first casino shut down a section of its floor. It was meant to be temporary, but those doors never reopened. The once steady hum of slot machines faded to silence. Staff began noticing full aisles with no players, chairs left pushed in, and lights blinking over empty tables. The casino floor that once felt alive now seemed forgotten by time itself. One by one, employees started receiving fewer shifts. Some moved to Las Vegas for work, others stayed, hoping business would return. Their optimism turned into long waits at the bar, sharing stories of the crowds that never came back. The big roller coaster, once Primm's proud landmark, was shut down for maintenance and never restarted. The metal track rusted in the desert sun, its silence echoing the end of the excitement that once defined the entire town. Hotel rooms began to sit empty. Cleaning crews stopped coming as often, leaving dust to gather where guests once stayed. Beds stayed made, perfectly neat, as if waiting for travelers who would never again check in at the front desk. Business owners nearby noticed the change first. Gas stations saw fewer stops, diners served fewer plates, and souvenir shops sat empty through weekends. Each closure pushed the next closer to giving up, as the entire town started folding in on itself. Lights in the casino began turning off early at night. Managers decided it wasn't worth the power bill to keep every sign glowing. What once drew travelers in from miles away now faded quietly into the darkness of the desert. Machines were unplugged to cut costs. The jingling sound that used to echo across the floor stopped completely. The smell of stale smoke lingered, but the laughter and music that once filled the air had vanished like a dream ending. Hours for staff were slashed, and full-time employees became part-timers. Some stayed out of loyalty, others because there were no other options nearby. Each passing week made it harder to believe the casinos would ever recover their former energy. Restaurants inside the hotels began shutting down. Empty tables stayed set with napkins folded perfectly, waiting for guests who no longer came. Kitchens once filled with the noise of frying pans and shouting cooks now echoed with quiet emptiness. One casino closed an entire wing, locking the doors and posting small signs that read "temporarily closed," but the signs stayed up for years. Behind those doors, slot machines gathered layers of dust, untouched since the night they were turned off. Security guards still walked the casino floors, their footsteps echoing through long hallways. They checked locked doors and silent bars, keeping watch over spaces built for crowds that never returned. Their flashlights moved across empty walls lined with forgotten posters. Concerts and events disappeared from the calendar. The small stage in the lounge sat dark, microphones unplugged, instruments boxed away. The same stage that once hosted cheerful music now served as storage for old tables and broken chairs. Locals noticed the change more than visitors did. Fewer cars meant quieter nights, but also fewer jobs. The flow of cash that once kept everything running dried up, and the town began to feel smaller with each passing month. As casinos shut down, homes around them emptied too. Families moved toward bigger cities, leaving houses half-packed and for sale signs leaning in the wind. Streets that once hosted neighborhood barbecues now stood empty, with porch lights left burning out of habit. By the time the last buffet closed, the town's sense of community was already fading. People stopped gathering, and the few remaining workers felt like ghosts maintaining the memory of a dream everyone else had already left behind. Across Nevada, other towns began to show the same signs. Laughlin, once a lively river town, started losing visitors too. Tonopah's small casinos struggled to stay open. The story that began in Primm was quietly repeating itself across the entire state. Everywhere, casino lights that once glowed bright against the desert sky began to dim. The laughter, music, and excitement that defined Nevada's small towns started fading away, replaced by the quiet hum of machines left running without purpose. Corporate buyouts swept across the region. Big companies purchased struggling casinos, merging operations and cutting costs. On paper, it looked like efficiency. On the ground, it meant fewer local jobs and the slow erasure of each town's unique identity. Las Vegas became the new focus. Corporations poured money into massive resorts on the Strip, drawing all attention there. Marketing budgets that once promoted roadside towns vanished, and the glow of the big city began swallowing every smaller light around it. Profits from smaller casinos were redirected to feed expansion projects in Vegas. The goal was to grow bigger, not to preserve the past. Those decisions made sense on paper, but for people living outside the city, it meant losing everything. The state's gambling landscape began to shift. The Strip dominated the conversation, while small-town casinos quietly faded. Tourists no longer wanted to explore the edges of Nevada. They followed the advertisements straight to the center of the empire. Bus tours that once filled roadside casinos with energy started canceling routes. Travelers found better deals inside Vegas itself, leaving little reason to stop elsewhere. The old rhythm of pit stops and weekend detours was gone, replaced by straight drives to the Strip. For decades, Primm had survived on passing travelers. Once they stopped coming, nothing could replace them. The restaurants closed, the shops shuttered, and even the gas stations reduced their hours. The highway through Primm became a shortcut, not a destination. Locals from other small towns began whispering that Primm was just the beginning. They saw their own casinos cutting hours, trimming staff, and struggling to keep lights on. What happened at the border was spreading like a quiet infection across Nevada. Primm's empty buildings became warnings of what happens when a state built on gambling starts to run out of luck. The town wasn't destroyed, it was drained, piece by piece, until nothing remained but neon skeletons and desert wind. The next wave of change didn't come from highways or hotels, but from the internet. Online gambling began turning every phone and laptop into a casino, replacing flashing lights and ringing machines with a tap of a finger. Younger gamblers found no reason to visit physical casinos. They could bet on sports, spin virtual slots, and play poker without ever leaving their couch. The thrill that once drew people to the desert was now contained in an app. Sports betting exploded across the country. Each new platform pulled thousands of players away from small-town casinos. What used to be a social experience became private, and the cash that kept Nevada alive began flowing into digital accounts instead. Convenience became the new attraction. No long drives, no hotel stays, no gas money. For travelers, that sounded perfect. For Primm, it was the final blow. People no longer needed a border town to feel lucky. They could gamble from anywhere. Small casino owners couldn't adapt fast enough. Setting up online systems required licenses and money they didn't have. While big corporations moved into the digital space, local businesses watched their regulars disappear without ever walking through the door again. Nevada's regulations evolved to favor larger companies. The promise of modernization sounded good, but it pushed out the independents. The same towns that helped build the state's gambling legacy were now being quietly erased by new laws meant for giants. The old model no longer made sense. A casino with hundreds of employees couldn't compete with an app that fit in your pocket. Every empty table and dark screen inside Primm's casinos became a symbol of that economic shift. What once felt like an adventure, pulling into a desert casino on a whim, had become unnecessary. The excitement of risk now came with no noise, no lights, no real people, only the faint glow of screens where luck no longer felt real. The money that used to flow into towns like Primm now bypassed them completely. Online systems didn't pay local taxes, didn't hire local workers, and didn't buy local food. The community economy collapsed quietly, without anyone to blame directly. Each year, more casinos across rural Nevada went dark. The once steady hum of roadside gambling turned into a quiet stretch of empty parking lots. The sound of spinning wheels and clinking chips was replaced by the quiet rhythm of the wind. The human cost became harder to ignore. Dealers, once proud of their work, were now stocking shelves or driving trucks. For some, the casino floor had been their entire life, and watching it vanish left a gap no other job could fill. Waitresses who once served drinks and laughter now worked in diners with half the pay. Cooks and maintenance crews left the state altogether. The community that thrived around the casinos began to scatter, taking the warmth of the town with them. Schools saw fewer students as families moved away. Teachers packed classrooms into smaller spaces, and playgrounds stood half empty. The loss of casino revenue reached every corner of daily life, shrinking budgets and leaving the town without its financial heartbeat. Houses went up for sale faster than they could be bought. For many, selling meant accepting a loss, but staying meant watching everything fall apart. Property values dropped, and entire neighborhoods felt frozen in time, waiting for buyers who never came. Local diners, once open around the clock, began closing early. Regulars who spent mornings drinking coffee after long shifts were gone. The smell of bacon and coffee was replaced by the faint odor of dust and locked doors. With less tax revenue, city services shrank, streetlights stayed broken longer, trash pickups slowed, and public spaces stopped being maintained. What was once a proud, lively desert town began to resemble a forgotten stopover rather than a home. The older residents refused to leave. Many had raised families here and couldn't imagine starting over. They spent evenings sitting on porches, watching the horizon where casino lights once shimmered, remembering the noise and color that had filled their lives. Inside the casinos, only a handful of workers remained. They walked through silent hallways, checking power boxes and doors, keeping an eye on properties that no longer needed anyone. The emptiness around them became part of their daily routine. The few functioning machines stood as reminders of what once was. Their flickering screens glowed faintly, surrounded by hundreds of others unplugged for good. Every sound felt out of place, echoing too loudly across wide, deserted gaming floors. Those who stayed behind often spoke of memory more than money. They remembered the lines of travelers, the music, and the laughter. Now the only rhythm left came from air vents humming through empty buildings, holding on to the past. Across Nevada, Primm's story started repeating itself. The fall of one small town became a pattern, another reflection of a changing country, where technology replaced people, and convenience replaced community. What happened here mirrored the quiet decline seen everywhere else. Automation wasn't just inside casinos. Machines replaced cashiers, cooks, and even cleaning crews. The new systems worked faster and cheaper, but they removed the very people who once gave these places their energy. The future arrived, but it came at a cost. Corporate consolidation grew across every industry. The same companies that ran Vegas hotels also owned restaurants, entertainment venues, and even online platforms. Small-town ownership disappeared, and the personal touch that once defined places like Primm faded with it. The middle class that once filled these casinos began shrinking. Vacations turned into luxuries, and gambling into an occasional treat. Nevada's economy, once built around everyday travelers, now revolved around the wealthy few visiting the biggest resorts in Las Vegas. Roadside America, once full of diners, motels, and casinos glowing under neon skies, became quieter with each passing year. These fading towns weren't just losing money, they were losing identity, leaving behind empty shells where generations once chased a little bit of hope. Younger generations no longer saw the appeal of roadside casinos. They wanted experiences, not routines, and viewed gambling as something dated. The same neon signs that once screamed excitement now looked like artifacts from a world that had already moved on. Old billboards along the highway still promised jackpots and free rooms, but their colors were faded by the sun. Few travelers even looked at them anymore. Each one stood like a forgotten monument to dreams that never found new believers. The ghost towns spreading through Nevada became more than curiosities. They became symbols of what happens when progress leaves small communities behind. People visited them briefly, took photos, and drove away, never realizing they were looking at pieces of living history. Every empty casino floor, every locked door, told a story about changing values. The thrill of gambling had become just another product, stripped of mystery. What once felt daring now existed behind screens, leaving the desert silent in its absence. The highway that once connected opportunity now carried the memory of loss. The same road that once led to flashing lights and laughter now led travelers past hollow buildings that once promised fortune. Nevada's bright future had become its own reflection. Back in Las Vegas, the story looked different. The Strip glowed brighter than ever, filled with new resorts, giant screens, and luxury attractions. It felt like success, but beneath that shine, the cost of survival was growing heavier each year. Mega resorts drew the world's attention, but they consumed everything around them. Every new expansion, every flashy hotel, pulled life away from smaller towns. The success of the Strip came at the quiet expense of the communities that once supported it. Advertising budgets focused entirely on Vegas, leaving no space for the rest of Nevada. Billboards, websites, and travel guides all pointed in one direction. The desert towns that built the state's gambling reputation were left behind, swallowed by corporate strategy. For travelers, Vegas looked stronger than ever. For workers, it was a different story. Many who left Primm hoping to rebuild their lives found it wasn't the same city anymore. The personal touch of old Vegas had been replaced by scale. Rising prices made gambling less accessible. The simple joy of low-cost tables and cheap buffets was gone. The Strip became a luxury playground, and the people who once filled small-town casinos could no longer afford even a short stay. The casino culture that once belonged to everyday travelers turned into a polished brand. The sound of coins falling into trays was replaced by credit systems and digital screens. Vegas looked alive, but the energy that once defined it was missing. Many workers from Primm couldn't find steady jobs in the new resorts. Automation and outsourcing had taken over much of the labor. For them, the lights of Vegas no longer meant opportunity. They meant the reminder of what they had lost. The Strip survived on image more than substance. Behind the glittering facades, profit margins grew thinner, and competition became ruthless. Tourists still came, but they spent less and stayed shorter, and the city depended more on illusion than ever before. Meanwhile, outside the city limits, the silence stretched for miles. Empty buildings stood like open graves, their signs flickering in the wind. The contrast between the roaring Strip and the quiet desert painted the true picture of Nevada's divided reality. The empire that once built joy from chance was now feeding on nostalgia. Vegas thrived on its image of success, while towns like Primm served as silent reminders that no empire stays lucky forever, no matter how bright the lights shine. Primm's quiet streets became a warning. The town's fall wasn't an isolated failure. It was a sign of what could happen when an entire industry forgets its foundation. Every locked door whispered a question about how long Vegas could truly endure. Other border towns began to look familiar to Primm's fate. Empty parking lots, dark marquees, and fading murals appeared across the map. Each place carried its own story, but together, they drew a single line, pointing toward the same future. Online gambling continued to grow, and new generations never experienced the old thrill of casino floors. For them, gambling was a digital experience without the sights, sounds, or stories that once defined Nevada's entire culture. The connection was gone. Old casino buildings started being sold to developers. Some were turned into warehouses, others into storage units. A few were simply left to decay. The once vibrant icons of roadside America became forgotten shells, fading quietly under the desert sun. Entire neighborhoods disappeared from state maps. Postal routes were redrawn, and town names were removed from signs. What used to be part of Nevada's living identity now existed only in memories and photographs left on forgotten tourism brochures. Las Vegas kept building higher and brighter, but cracks formed beneath the surface. The state's dependence on tourism and gambling made it fragile. Economists began to wonder how long a single city could carry the weight of an entire industry. Experts warned that the future of gambling would no longer belong to places, but to platforms. If that happened, the Strip's towers would stand as monuments to a world that no longer needed them, just as Primm's casinos once did. The silence of Primm told a simple truth: nothing built on endless growth lasts forever. The town's fall wasn't dramatic, it was quiet, steady, and complete, proof that even the brightest lights fade when the world stops looking their way. Today, Primm still sits under the desert sun. Its parking lots remain empty, its windows clouded with dust. Travelers pass by without stopping, unaware they're driving past the remains of one of Nevada's first and clearest warning signs. Every empire, no matter how strong, eventually faces its own decline. Nevada built its fortune on chance, but luck never lasts. The story of Primm isn't just about one town, it's about how even the house, in the end, can lose.